We are meeting this evening as the District Advisory Building Committee. It is Thursday, October 15th, and we are doing business via Zoom, and Councilor Ray and Board Member Figdor just joined us, so welcome, both of you. And I'm going to do a quick attendance, and Doug, if you could record as well, that would be great. Brad Post. If you could unmute yourself, guys, when just say here. Brad?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Nope. You're here.
Okay. Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Thank you. Jay Norris?
Here.
Thank you. Paul Stevens? Belinda Ray, Councilor Ray?
Here.
Board Member Balfons?
Here.
Matt Winch?
Here.
Abigail Fuller?
Here.
Emily Figdor, Board Member Figdor?
Here.
Hello. Jessica Marino?
Here.
Co-Chair Justin Costa?
Here.
And we have on with us this evening as well, staff, Doug Sherwood, our Facilities Coordinator, Steve Stilfen, our Facilities Director, Mr. Javier Botana, our Superintendent, as well as our team from Harriman, Mark Lee, Lisa Sawin, and Emily Wall. So welcome, everybody. First, we're going to start off with the meeting minutes from the September 17th Zoom meeting. Do I have a motion? Mr. Belfont, seconded by?
Second.
Okay. Any errors or omissions on the meeting minutes?
No.
No public comment. The only thing that I had sent an email to Emily on was if we could start posting the start and end times as well on our meeting minutes, that would be great. Okay, so all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes from September 17th, please indicate.
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, aye. Aye.
Aye, aye. Okay, I think it passes unanimous with all those present. I wanted to start off this evening before I turn over the baton to Mark Lee from Harriman. I wanted to thank Jessica Marino. She did a fantastic, and I only got to see bits and pieces of it, but she represented us well. She was asked to present to the Daring Center Neighborhood Association on the DABC work, and it was great, Jess. So thank you so much for doing that. You really did a bang-up job. It was great.
Well, thank you for Harriman all the slides, which I pretty much just showed and gave a summary of. But it was fun. Thanks.
Oh, you did a great job. Thank you very much for doing that. So I will turn it over to Mr. Lee. And we'll see where you are. Oh, there you are. Hello, Mark.
I'm here. I don't know if everyone can see me.
Great. Thank you. Yes.
All right. And hopefully you see a slide that says Portland Public Schools DABC meeting. Wonderful. All right. Very good. So we will move forward here to the agenda for this evening. We had already done one, which is welcome and approval. So we're going to update everyone on the renderings of the concept designs. They've just been finalized. You've seen some of the final renderings, but there's been, I think, a few more polishing steps on a few of them. So we'll just kind of walk you through that. The next piece is the GC, the General Contractor Prequalification Process. And so now that we're getting right up to the point where we're getting really close to putting these out to bid, we want to go through that process of what that's going to look like from now to actually getting contractors on board, bidding the projects and awarding those. So we'll go through that. We'll have a conversation on the Green New Deal, the referendum question, and what impact that would be to the project as we understand from the language. So a little piece on that. And I want to say lastly, but the biggest content area lastly is just our prep for the community forum. And so that's next week on Wednesday. And so we want to just share with everyone where we are with that preparation for the third and final community forum before we go out to bid on these three schools. And then we'll again look at just where we are with the schedule and next steps, and then adjourn. Any questions on that before I dig in here? Okay. Very good. All right. So the renderings that we've been working on, you may have seen this one, but this is essentially, we can't take credit for most of this architecture. This is the school just represented in the digital rendering. But what it does show is the ramp and the stairs that we're designing so that it replaces the more temporary ramp, but this is the primary entrance to the school. And so there's just the notion that it's more aligned with the access from the parking lot, and that really becomes our primary entrance point for folks coming and going to the school. So the next one is the addition from the backside as currently envisioned. So it's I think we've seen this before, but it's the lower level which has two of the education spaces. The upper level, which has on the right hand side, has the kindergarten or the pre-K room, and then over on the left hand side is the cafeteria. So that's as proposed. And then the entrance to Presumpscot, primarily the entrance is on the right-hand side of the image, but it also shows how it ties in with the existing school on the left-hand side. So, that now I don't think this one had all the vegetation and students in front of it the last time we shared. And then I think we also added the Reiki entrance now, which is more finished looking than what it was when we shared it the last time. This is probably the one that has seen the most development since the last time it was shared. Very good. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Lisa Sawin. But first, I guess any questions on that before we move on to the GC prequalification process?
Mark, why isn't there a rendering of the addition in the back to Presumpscot?
That's we're still working on some of the details of that. That's why we haven't engaged the rendering side of it yet. But we should be able to have something to share at some level with the meetings coming forward here.
Thank you. I don't see any questions, Mark, so go ahead.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to kind of walk through what the GC prequalification process is all about and the dates that we have right now set up. So Lisa?
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So good evening. Good to see everyone. So GC prequalification. So this is the process where we put out advertisements for general contractors, which is what GC stands for, to see who would be interested and has the correct qualifications to bid on these projects. And so we submit the draft documents to Portland Public Schools, and so essentially what that is the information that goes into the advertisement talking about what we're asking for from these general contractors. And that would be later this month. And then we would advertise for those general contractors, and their qualifications would then be submitted to us. So we put out an ad, it's out for a couple weeks, and then we get those qualifications back. We review those qualifications and determine which ones have met the qualifications that we've outlined. And that becomes our list of qualified general contractors that can bid on these projects. So when it becomes bid day, if they haven't gone through that process, they're not able to bid on the project. What that does is it helps us to really make sure that those who are going after this project have all of the correct qualifications and experience to execute these projects during construction. We'll notify those applicants in November and then advertise for bidding of the projects in December. And have the bid documents ready, and then bids are due back in the beginning of 2021. In a minute here, we'll kind of talk about what that process will look like as to how we're going to package these packages of the different school designs. But once we have the bids back, it then goes to the school board for ratification, so acceptance of the contractor bid. And then if we need to do we notify the contractors, and if we need to do any VE, which is value engineering, and again, what that means is if the project came in over budget, that's the process to which we go through and look at what are those areas that we can take out of the project to put it within the correct budget. And then we go back to school board for approval of the contractor's contract based on based on the final price that we arrived at and scope that we arrived at. And so the timeline you can see on this slide here. I know that throughout this process we've talked about different packaging of the projects. We've talked about packaging these all as one bid, which has advantages, and we've also talked about this idea of separating them out into separate bid packages. What we've been doing is really watching the market and having conversations with contractors as to what they're seeing in the market right now, what other projects are hitting right around the same time that we are, as in what projects are going out to bid. We talked with our cost estimator to see what other things that they're seeing that may influence a decision. And ultimately what we're seeing is we've learned that there's two very large projects that are coming out in December for bid. And so if we were to go out as one package, we would be competing with those two very large projects for contractors that can handle a project of that scale and magnitude. If we break it apart, we now have more of we drum up more competition because now there's smaller packages that can reach different contractors, different size contractors, and they have the flexibility to look at how many can they fit maybe in their schedule, and can they bid on one or multiple. And so the research that we've done has shown us that we will create the most competition by breaking them up into 3 bid packages and staggering them so that we release one, it goes to bid, it's out on the street for a couple weeks, we get bids back, and then the next one goes to bid, and we stagger them that way so that if a contractor doesn't get the first one, they know they can now go after the second one, sharpen their pencil, provide even more competitive numbers for that second one, give us the bids on that, and then they can also decide if they go after the third one. So that we're not competing with those large contractors to do those very significant projects. When we say large, these are projects in the $80 to $100 million range that are coming out at the same time. One of the things to think about if we do package it all as one is now a contractor has to have 3 project managers, 3 general contractors, 3 project engineers, all available at the exact same time to execute all 3 projects simultaneously. And the feedback we were getting from contractors is that means the timing has to be absolutely perfect for them to be able to really think that that's something they can fit into their schedule. So based on that research, what we're seeing is the most advantageous process for these projects is to break them into 3 separate packages and stagger them into 3 separate bid packages at this time, and looking to release those at the very beginning of December, end of November, beginning of December. So that is the summary on the GC prequalification and sort of the process of putting these out on the street. And I'll pause there to see if there's any questions on that.
Turning to Board Member Figdor.
Thank you so much. Lisa, I'm wondering, so you said stagger them by a few weeks, so they would all be staggered by several weeks between them, and how would you decide on the ordering?
Great question. So yeah, we would aim to have one go out December, one January, one February, and so then The order that we were thinking about is as one gets released, it has just a little bit more time than maybe the next one to get going. And so looking at what are the more complex phasing to kind of have that one go first and the less complex phasing to go last. Because that way there's a little bit more flexibility and the less complicated phasing project kind of absorbs some extra time if for that there's off chance that we need it. And so the way we've looked at it right now, and it's not set in stone, but we've looked at Longfellow going first, Reiki, and Presumpscot. And the reason that we set it up that way initially is Longfellow has a little bit longer duration than the other two in regards to the way the phasing works out, and has a lot more of the abatement work. And then Reiki has a long phasing as well. Presumpscot has the shortest duration of construction time. So if we had to keep the portables on for another month or two, that would be easier to do than maybe with the other projects where it's a huge chunk of the school that's still under construction. With Presumpscot, it's additions, less renovation. So it's easier to kind of keep that segregated. So that was our thinking. But obviously, we're open to the thoughts and discussions around that.
And just to follow up, is there a risk that that there are not enough GCs around that all, that all three projects are sufficiently bid on?
I mean, you never can predict who's going to bid on a project. What we try to do is make it as attractive as possible to solicit as many bidders. And so the feedback we were getting from the multiple GCs that we spoke to is that by doing this, it makes it most attractive because of the flexibility that it offers to be able to fit it into different schedules. And they don't know what fits, whether 1, 2, or 3 will fit best until they really know what other projects maybe they're successful on. If they haven't won any projects up to that date, they may decide to bid on all 3 anyway. We really don't know, but the feedback we're getting is that this provides the most competition compared to putting all 3 together.
All set, Emily?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Ray?
Thank you. So I had, I think, 2 questions. The first one would be that the schedule that we're seeing on the screen doesn't reflect the staggered bids. Is that true? So it would really probably be school board approval in February, and then another one in March, and another one in April, or something like that?
It would pretty much stagger from January on. Yes, you're right.
Okay. And then to follow up on Emily's question a little bit, is there a way, or is it wise, to also make it known that there are 3 contracts so that larger GCs would also be attracted? I mean, will people know as we're putting out the first one that there are 2 more to follow?
Yes, we can definitely make sure that is clear in the advertisements.
And that will also be part of the pre-qualification. We're pre-qualifying them for all 3. And so they'll be aware when they're submitting their qualifications that it's for potentially any of or all 3.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Matthew Winch?
So I've got a number of questions, Lisa and Mark. I don't know if it's easier to answer them or to attack them one at a time, or for me to just rattle off the questions. Maybe I'll just try and do it one at a time. First, an observation, I would think that pre-qualification would start to identify at least interested contractors, so they wouldn't necessarily bid it, but you'll at least have a sense through pre-qualification who might be interested. My larger question, and it's sort of timing with respect to budget, if you stagger these, there's the potential that you're going to be getting, pricing in January, pricing in February, and pricing in March, or somewhere in that time frame. It seems to me that it's going to be harder to deal with budget issues 3 separate times than it would to be able to deal with them collectively. So do you have a strategy for potentially dealing with budget overages or the need to try and corral these in at one certain time, or are you going to try and do it for each project, which seems challenging to me? Then I have 2 other questions.
Yeah, sure. Matt, the first answer is that we work right now with the budgets that we've kind of established for the 3 different schools. Understand we have 2 contingencies that we set aside. One half of the contingency is used for the bid contingency, and the other half is used for the construction contingency. And so the idea that's our that 5% that we use for the bid contingency is our ability to adjust to market overages or not, and that we would identify value engineering for each of the projects. And so for instance, if the first one comes in over, that we would look at potentially a VE process for that one as we're bidding the second one. So we're trying to keep these as much as possible, these budgets aligned with where we've established the scope and the cost for the schools right now. So that's kind of, we would deal with them in that way, but there is a contingency, the big contingency that we can use to help regulate the differences between each of the projects.
Yeah, I guess because along those lines, I'd wonder if you wouldn't bid Longfellow last, since it has, or are you confident that the addition off the back is going to work within the confines of that budget?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and I think that may play into it. You're right that that one will be evaluating. That's wonderful. We'll be evaluating, carefully because that is taking a much bigger bite than we originally anticipated for the Longfellow. We're in the process of actually fine-tuning an estimate for it now to know exactly how much of that fits into the current budget. And that may play into, it's an excellent point, Matt, where it may play into a strategy where we're thinking about Longfellow and where it falls relative to the other 2.
Yeah, so the next question pertains less to GCs and more to subcontractors, because it strikes me that they're just as important, if not more important, than GCs at this point. Obviously, you need GC interest, but the subcontractors, are they going to be, it's not the greatest subcontractor market either. Are they going to be overwhelmed by these 2 larger projects going out to bid in December? And what are those projects and how big are they? Are they the hospital projects?
No, so it's we think even when it comes to the subcontract pool, that by splitting them, we're in a much better place because the 2 large school projects that Lisa spoke of, one is a $100 million project in Auburn, and the other one is about, I think, an $80-something million project in South Portland Middle School. And so those are fairly sizable projects when we compare those to the size of the 3 projects that we're talking about. And so even thinking about the subcontractors required for those projects, they're much larger subcontractors than what they would be needed for these projects, these 3 school projects.
Okay. Then the last question was, I guess I'm still sort of advocating for this idea of giving choice. But if you bid them at the same time, you could still bid the strategy of bidding them as independent projects, or offering a larger company, or even a smaller one for that matter, of trying to make a proposal of how they could manage 3 projects at one time, because that may actually work favorably for them as well, based on their staffing arrangements, as well as abilities to have multiple could have 2 or 3 different drywallers depending on what the project is. So I guess I question in some respects it sort of limits flexibility in one respect, while still, I understand your thought of how you wanted to stagger this, but I'm just continuing to think about, an opportunity for a GC to look at this in a different aspect of how they may be able to accomplish this as one sole contract, and you're sort of taking that option off the table, and I'm wondering if there's a way to try and preserve that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, Matt, if sort of the value or sort of a comparison of the points you made in what we're hearing from contractors, which was that they almost everyone that we've heard from has said, we don't have 3 project managers. We would likely not do all 3. We would. It's just very, very difficult. So the contractors we've spoke to said we will bid all 3, but we won't be able to do all 3. And so I think, if we send them all out at once, we may be shrinking our pool of contractors, because they likely, if they're trying to prepare 3 bids at one time, that's a lot more effort, and they're not potentially going to do that, because if they prepare 3 bids, they might get all 3 projects. And so it's awfully difficult for them to say, oh, sorry, I'm going to back out at the time that they've already submitted the bid. They have to submit a bid bond at the time too. So they need to have the ability to select, if they get one, that they're not going after the other 2. And so what we're trying to do is just maximize the competitive pool of contractors that would bid on not just one, but all 3 of them. I don't know if that sort of weighs in with what you're talking about or not.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I appreciate the sort of understanding at that deeper level, because I'm just continuing to think of how to do this less expensively is all, and still sticks to me that a sole source could do that efficiently. And my final question, I'll stop yammering here. Have you thought about delaying things just a little bit longer? Or are you confident that the South Portland and Auburn projects are going to be in the rearview mirror come the time you start to bid this first project?
We think that they are not going to be in the rearview mirror. We think that everything we know right now is that the Auburn and South Portland projects are going to be bidding in December and January, and they're larger, so they potentially have a little bit longer bid schedule than this one. But we also, again, think that the pool of contractors that are really going after those is going to be different than the pool of contractors going after this one. So when we go out with the first one, we don't think it's going to be the same contractors. There may be contractors that can take on one of those large ones and a small one, but right now we're understanding that in order for us to be viable with these, we have to have a strategy that's going to attract contractors to price them, and by splitting them, we kind of keep it's really the contractors that don't have the bonding capacity to do a $80 and $100 million school project, or even the project management capabilities to do that large of a project.
Okay.
All set, Matt?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Jessica Marino?
I had similar question to Matt about the budget issue. I just am concerned that we'll be in this, the reason we were trying to avoid having the schools done sequentially is so that the last school doesn't end up getting, losing part of its budget to the other 2 schools. And, there's only so much that you can value engineer, as we learned from Lyseth. So would we be in a position where we have to make a huge, cut to one plan before we even know what the other bids are going to be? It seems like we'll have to be making hard decisions kind of in the dark, school by school, without knowing, what the bids are going to be for the next school. So that's my concern. And I mean, it seems kind of like whichever school goes last is at a disadvantage. and it probably will be between Longfellow and Presumpscot are really the only places you can make cuts. Reiki is what it is. There's not a lot that we can do to that project. So that would be my concern with putting them out sequentially. I know you kind of answered that with Matt already, but I just want to put out there that.
Sure. Yeah, I think the only other maybe point, Jessica, that I'm thinking about right now is that I think also with what happened with Lyseth is that it took us a little while to get through that value engineering process before we landed on signing the contract for it, to the point where I think we'll have we may well have some of the information on the other projects by then, but I think it's something that we need to contemplate on a little bit further and understanding that. But our intent is to kind of work again inside of these established budgets that we've identified for the three schools with but the sort of concern is very much there in terms of understanding that we don't want to have to borrow or use up funds that are available on the first ones at the detriment of the last one.
So let me ask a follow-up question. If we're still doing value engineering and not knowing not accepting a bid by the time like the second school goes out, then the contractors still don't know whether their bid's been accepted. So how would they know whether they want to bid on another school?
Yeah, I think the best answer to that is that as we discovered with Lyseth, the common practice is to engage with the lowest qualified bidder during that value engineering process. So it's not that you would throw their bid out and go to the next one. The next one would be the next higher bidder, and so you most often were working with the lowest qualified bidder to enter into that value engineering process.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Okay, go ahead, Mark. Oh, I see Emily has her hand again.
Thank you. Just to reiterate some of the concerns about the ordering of the schools, I want to voice a concern that if, Presumpscot and Reiki are of these schools are the two high poverty schools included in the BFOF. And I do have real concerns about having those two schools be last and moving forward with Lyseth and Longfellow beforehand. It, I think, will raise concerns in the community, even if those concerns aren't well-founded, that our high poverty schools are not being given as much focus and attention, or are being, are not being prioritized in the way that the other schools are. So I do, Presumpscot in particular has been a real concern in the community, that it kind of throughout this whole process has been at times on the chopping block. And so I think it is a real concern in terms of the ordering, that we ensure, of course, that the projects are being considered in the order that makes the most sense in terms of tackling the projects, but also I think the larger concerns about the community's response to them should be considered as well.
Thank you, Emily. Anybody else? Okay. Want to proceed ahead, Mark?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So the next one is just it's labeled the Green New Deal referendum question, and the impact of what that means to the project, and I know this is something that's gotten got a fair amount of press in sort of the paper as of late, and so in light of that, we looked at a couple of the considerations for the what it might mean for these three projects. And so in reading through the proposed language, it really kind of falls into two categories, the impacts. The first is construction, and there are really two parts to the construction that it has an impact on. One is there's a requirement for apprentices that the contractors have to hire a certain percentage of their workforce to be apprentices. And most contractors right now don't hire that many apprentices. So there may be an impact that they are filling job positions that they otherwise wouldn't to carry the number of apprentices required. So that it might have a financial impact on their staffing of the projects. The other one is that it requires wage rates to comply with state and or local fair wage rates. And most contractors are doing that right now. They need to because of, one, we require it in our contracts that they comply with Department of Labor's wages. And then the second piece of that is that right now with the labor market, they have to meet those at least, or they won't be attracting enough skilled laborers to do the work. So we don't think that the wage rate aspect has an impact or significant impact on the projects. The next one is that it also requires OSHA training for the contractors, and most of them comply with that requirement right now in terms of they're required to have a certain number of hours of OSHA training for job site safety. So those two items, the wage rates and the OSHA training, we don't think have an impact. We think the apprentice requirements may have an impact. The other aspects of the Green New Deal relate to the design side of it, so what we're tasked with. And the big one is that it makes mandatory a percentage better than the current energy requirements for the projects. And so right now we are going through, as you all know, with the LEED program, and we have a certain number of credits that we need to meet for LEED. Some of those credits are tied to the energy performance of the building, but there are many other areas of LEED that address other sustainable aspects of the building. What the Green New Deal does is it makes the energy requirements a mandatory aspect of it. So it provides less flexibility for us, and it's sort of the consideration we talked about when we were looking at LEED for LICEF, and the challenge of if we were to have to meet the energy requirements, we would be putting more money in meeting the energy requirements than in addressing some of the educational program needs. And so right now, that would mean we would have to redirect our design to address the envelope and the energy or the mechanical systems, the HVAC systems, to address the energy requirements and not do some of the other aspects of the improvements to the school or even some of the additions that we're proposing. So that gives us much less flexibility in terms of how we spend our money if this were to pass from that perspective. The other one design item is when it comes to the roofs. And there's a program called Better Roofs that it references, and that means that you have to set aside 15% of the roof to be solar installation ready, or you could also use it as a vegetative roof. And the one thing that would likely trigger on some of our existing roofs is that they right now don't need to be upgraded unless we impose more load on them. If we were to impose more load on an existing roof, that 15% area, we would require to do structural upgrades to the roof to allow it to hold that. So that would potentially require us to spend money on reinforcing the roof, a portion of the roof, to meet that increased load. So those are the ways in which we think the referendum question would impact the school designs as we've kind of outlined them now. There's an aspect that we're not entirely sure of, and that is sort of the timing of it. And I'm not, sure that if it takes effect at the time of its certification or verification of the vote. If that's the case, then what the changes to the ordinance say is that the enforcement occurs at the time that you apply for the building permit, and we won't do that until December or January, and so that means that it would be after we'll know whether the vote on the Green New Deal passes or not. I don't know if there's forgiveness for projects that are already in design. There's nothing that specifically identifies that in the language of the ordinance that is on the website of the. So that part I'm not certain if it has an immediate impact or if there's some way that that existing projects are forgiven. So that's sort of the lowdown on that on how this may impact our project.
Any questions for anyone on that? Okay, Justin.
Sorry, can I? I forgot to raise my hand. I'll go later. I'll go after Justin.
That's okay, Jess, go ahead.
No, so I mean, is there any kind of, could you provide a written summary of this with some outlines or bullet points? Because I would love to share this information with people.
Absolutely, Jessica. I'll in fact, what we'll do is Emily, we'll put those on a point. Emily will get those out to everyone.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Costa?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So, Mark, I guess what I would like us to sort of tease out a little bit is the timing aspects that you were talking about. I mean, because it seems to me like if we're going to have to do things related to the building envelopes and all of those sorts of things, as well as the roofs, I mean, do you have a rough idea of how long that would take us to redo these designs?
It would take a significant amount of time for us to do that. Not only just in terms of, first we all would have to come to consensus on when we're putting money towards the mechanical systems in the envelope, we all have to then go through this whole equity lens that we began this entire process to understand what it is that we can what is it that we agree are the priorities to move forward with. And so that would I think require some time just for all of us to come to that consensus. And then once we do, that change in the design scope is going to take us months to catch up with and rebid. And so we have to hold off on the bid, and we have to bid it much later than we are right now.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know that we have to like have this whole discussion right now, but that's where my mind went is, you know, we've spent a whole lot of time going through the timeline right now, and it seems to me like that is basically going to go out the window if we have to meet these requirements. And my reading of it is that we would have to meet these requirements. So, you know, again, I guess I'm just flagging that at this point. You know, this is not a concrete concern because we don't know what's going to happen, but probably at our next meeting, we're going to know one way or another, and we'll have to evaluate everything that we've talked about if the referendum passes.
Yeah, I think you're right, Justin. That there's one aspect in the ordinance that says there's the director of planning for the city can I think forgive these requirements, but I think it's on the grounds of an infeasibility almost from a technical perspective, not from the fact that there's already they were under design and therefore we can bypass it that way. But I think that's the only area that I think right now, other than the sort of aspect of if there's anything that I don't know from my reading of it in terms of when it becomes a change to the city ordinance.
So then my only other question is just sort of the process one. So Sarah or Javier, maybe this is a question for you, but of just you know, how are we communicating this information to the board? You know, because we don't want to go down this whole rabbit hole of like, you know, this is an advisory group to oversee the construction of these projects. We're not trying to like get involved in some big political fight, but at the same time, we do have to be communicating this possibility to stakeholders that have been involved in this. So like the board, the BLACs, all of those groups, what is or I guess the question is really what has been communicated at this point?
So I've communicated to the board that information that you just heard. I shared that with the board this past weekend. So, you know, they're aware of it. We don't have lots of details. We are expecting to do a bid sort of workshop for the board, sharing, you know, all of the things that you've seen to date. And, you know, obviously that will be a topic of discussion that is likely to happen after the election. So, you know, our next board meeting is on Tuesday and it's the last board meeting before the election. So we will know what the outcome is at that point. And we have BLAC meetings for all of the building level committees next week. So this will be part of that conversation as well.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful to know. So yeah, I think that's all I've got right now. But thanks for taking the time to go through this, Mark, and Lisa, and everyone else.
Thank you, Justin. Councilor Ray?
We can't hear you.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to clarify, though, when it takes effect. It's 30 days from the date of the results. So once the results are declared, 30 days after that, it goes into effect. And I do see those hardship pieces that Mark mentioned, but it says incapable, infeasible, you know, can't comply. So yeah, I don't know how subjective that would be. And then in terms of whether it would apply to something that's in design, in the past, the city, if someone has begun the application process, they have at times been able to say someone is already partway through, and so the ordinance wouldn't if a new ordinance wouldn't necessarily apply. But that would be something. It's tough because this one's a citizens initiative, and I think we have less flexibility there, but I'm not certain. So that'd be a good thing to check with the planning division in terms of if we had applications in, you know, for building permits, if we had started something, there might be some wiggle room there. That's all.
That's excellent information. Thank you, Councilor Ray.
Thank you. Matthew Winch?
So Melinda answered one of my questions. I was going to ask for an opinion from Corporation Counsel, but she's given that opinion, which is great. Mark, do you have an order of magnitude on the cost implications to go with the items that you outlined that Jessica asked for? Because I think that would be helpful as well for people to know, you know, here's the envelope cost, here's the roof cost, you know, and not exacting numbers, but, you know, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million for each of these various projects would have to go towards addressing this as a result of the Green New Deal, because I think that'd be helpful for folks to know, because it will show the real impact of, you know, the impact of built spaces versus the environmental items. And then the other question, now that you have that 30-day timeline identified by Belinda, by Councilor Ray, how quickly could you submit for a building permit?
Right.
Knowing, because I suspect that if this does pass, there is going to be a rush of applications that are, you know, they're probably incomplete, that will go to the code enforcement and permit review group. and they're going to be backlogged anyway. So is it possible to apply early?
Yeah, although in reverse order, Matt, I think that's exactly where my wheels were spinning. And again, Lisa can weigh in too what she thinks, but I think that gives us a window of time to get our application into the city, if that is indeed the case, that there's a 30-day enactment once the results are verified. So that's a possibility. And then with respect to the magnitude of cost, I learned through to be a little careful about putting any figures out there. So I think we'll take some time and get a sense of order of magnitude of what that may be between now and maybe in the next week here.
All set, Matt? Thank you. Board Member Figdor?
Thank you. I had two things. One, Mark, I know you said on the prevailing wage requirements that you didn't see those as having an impact because contractors are paying in the marketplace prevailing wages now. But I also just wanted to remind us that when we took on these projects, we chose to pay prevailing wage to require that the projects meet prevailing wage requirements. So that issue seems to be a non-issue regardless. And then second, I'm wondering for the superintendent if our lawyers have had a chance to take a look at the referendum, and if not, it seems like it would be good for them to do so, and so we're fully aware of the implications for these projects.
The legal implications, just to answer the question, they have not. And then I guess I'm asking, what would they be reviewing?
Well, we're hearing from Councilor Ray that it takes that that the requirements take effect 30 days after the results are finalized. If there's any clarifications around the timing of when the requirements kick in and what that means for our projects, it seems like we should fully understand. We should fully understand those details.
I'll be happy to ask them to do that. It'd be great if any board members that are on this, on this Zoom meeting, if you have specific questions that you would want to see answered by legal counsel, so that we're not having them answer the single question that you asked and then have others with, follow-up questions, and that just would probably be a good use of everybody's time.
Okay, thank you. I can follow up with additional questions.
Thank you, Emily. Jessica Marino?
I'm just curious, so I know how much to worry about this. Is there anyone more politically savvy than me on here that knows the likelihood of this passing? Is there any polling going on, or do we really have no idea how much momentum this question has?
Councilor Ray or Costa? Do either of you have any input on that?
I don't know any polling results. I think, I don't know. I don't have any good information to offer on that.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Costa, anything?
Yeah, I can't really be a political prognosticator, but I think there's a pretty good likelihood that this is going to pass.
Okay.
But that's just from my gut,
Thank you.
Jay?
You have a question?
Can you guys hear me? Sorry.
Yep, thank you.
That's an interesting question. I don't want to breach anyone's confidence just because of my work and because of the work that I do. I'm privy to some information, and there is some polling being conducted right now. Are you speaking specifically to the question about the Green New Deal and that, or the block of the referendum that we're looking at? Or were you speaking specific to one of the 3 or 4 or 5?
I think
I'm speaking specifically to the Green New Deal, but I know that they're all being packaged and promoted together. So I would guess that, people are either going to be all yes or they're going to be all no, just based on what I'm seeing. So.
I can't say I've seen a little bit. I can't say I've seen a lot. I certainly don't know anything more than the others here know. But I echo what Justin has said. It has a solid chance. Unfortunately, as far as I feel, of it going through, because people are obviously much more passionate. We have a lot more younger people. I think a lot more. We're showing a lot of ideologues coming out and voting earlier, and because of those numbers, it does have a strong chance of going through. All of these referendums do, and I think they're going to hurt if they do. But yeah, I think we're looking at some of these passing. I think some of that might be public in the coming days. Again, nothing I have right in front of me, but I think we might be seeing some of that. But it could change, obviously.
Thank you, Jay, for that input. That's
Yeah.
great. Anyone have any other further questions right now? Okay, we're going to keep going. Go ahead, Mark.
Excellent. Great. So the next item is our preparation for the community forum. Right now, we can report that postcards have been sent to residents within 500 feet of the property, and we have sent electronic flyers to, and when I say we, I give most credit to Emily Waugh, somewhere, there she is. Sent electronic flyers sent to the Portland community groups, to principals, lead teachers, and to BLAC and DABC members. And also social media posting and banner ads on the website. So and you can see what the digital flyer is on the screen here. So that information is out, and we're I know I've seen a response on some of it, so I know it's getting distributed, and so we feel like we're in good shape here as we set up for the forum on Wednesday night. Any questions on that?
Okay, I don't see any. Go ahead. Ms. Figdor?
Can you talk a little bit about the format of the forums?
Absolutely. And so I'm trying to think. The agenda for so the format's going to be very similar to what we did at the last community forum, which was the I think first time we had done it virtually. And so we'll have 1 hour for the forum itself at each schools, or dedicated to each school, and then a 15-minute break in between them. So our order is Longfellow, Reiki, and then Przemysl. We'll do just a very quick welcome and introductions. Then we'll get into the outcome of the very first community forum, where we develop the design statements, and then we'll look at the inventory of the facility needs. It's again a very high level of these are the needs of the schools that the projects are addressing. Then we will present the floor plans and renderings, again to address how we're going about improving the deficiencies of the schools. We have a couple of informational points on thinking it is timely, given the current environment of COVID-19, to give some update in terms of how the schools are responding to that, and how the designs are responding to COVID. And then a quick one on LEED, just as an update to how we're addressing the LEED requirements. And then project timeline, when folks can expect these projects to happen, and an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. So we're trying to get through all of the 6 items in about a half an hour, to leave about a half an hour for questions and answers.
And will there be an interpretation?
Yes, there will. So that has been all set up, and we'll do that in a similar fashion we did last time, where we ended up with the separate rooms, the translation rooms. And so that is in place already. So thank you to Portland Public Schools for organizing that.
Mark, I have a quick question. So that Ms. Figdor and Councilor Thibodeau, as well as Ms. Morioni, Mr. Mavadonis, Mr. Ali, and Mr. Rodriguez, are all co-chairs of those respective schools. Will they get a preview to this information?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. What we can do is we'll send those right out. In fact, we'll send out the individualized 4 or slides for each school to the co-chairs of those BLACs. So
Great. Thank you very much.
Excellent point. Thank you, Sarah.
Any further questions on this at this point, guys? Okay. Ms. Figdor?
Mark and Lisa, is your expectation that the BLAC committee chairs do the welcome and introductions, or you're going to kick off the whole thing?
It would be wonderful. We would encourage it to be introduced from the co-chairs or a chair of the BLACs.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay. Mark, you want to get going?
Absolutely. So this is just an example. This is Longfellow. I'll very quickly go through it, but that's the first bullet point of the design statement, statement of needs, floor plans, renderings, the COVID response, lead checklist, and so I won't go through those, but we will split those up and send those out. So. And so,
Mark, can you explain the COVID portion of that?
Sure, absolutely. Let me back up. I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you. So there's improvements that are currently underway that the district has been implementing. Steve and Doug and Javier, I know, have all been very, very busy, as well as many others, in implementing aspects to improve the current environments to the extent they can. And so those that are currently underway include the UV air exchange units in the nurse. And so there's a unit that goes in the ceiling of the nurse areas in those separation rooms right now. So if there's someone that has exhibits symptoms, they are placed in a space within the nurse suite, and they're in a room that has a UV light that scrubs the air going through it. There's also been improvements to make sure that there are operable windows in every classroom to allow more natural ventilation, and so that has been a process that's been underway. There are installation of hand sanitizing stations in multiple locations throughout the schools, and then there's the cleaning and servicing of the ventilation systems, and including the installation of ionizers. And I think Steve had spoken to that previously, but those, in addition to just installation of those ionizers, it's also making sure that the units are operational, that dampers are working, so that the intent is, again, that we have access to fresh air in classroom spaces or in education spaces. So that, I know Steve has spent a great deal of resources in going through inventorying spaces that need improvements and making those improvements. In addition to what's already underway, as we think about the projects that we're doing, the improvements to Przemska, to Reiki, and Longfellow all include a new suite. The nurse suite is new in each of those. So, and in doing so, we're creating isolation areas. And so in some of those, they don't have a separate isolation. If anyone's been into the Reiki school, you know that it's a cot in the sprinkler room, the old sprinkler room. That's the nurses area. So it doesn't have any physical separation. So the new layout has physical separation. And then the other area that we're doing is that the fixtures that we're putting in, water fountains, lavatories, water closets, urinals, all are touchless, so that you have less hand contact on surfaces. And so that's also an improvement in the new construction that we're doing. So in addition, I guess the other areas that we're doing are just in thinking about where we're putting in new ventilation. We're being cognizant of air exchange rates that provide as much possible fresh air and air changes in the space as we can safely.
Any questions? Okay.
All right, and with this, I'll turn it over to Lisa, who I think has pretty much already kind of give us an update of schedule, when she talked about the GC prequalification, but maybe just a recap of where we are here.
Sure. So as you can see, we're right at the marker of our third public forum that we're getting ready for next week, and we have continue to progress with the design documents. We'll get ready for another staff update now that school is well underway, and have that through Zoom. We are in the throes of the planning board process right now as well. So we've gone over sort of the bidding process. And so I don't know what's on the next slide, Mark.
I think it's simply probably just the, there we go, some dates.
Meetings. And so community forum, the agenda for those happening on the 21st, looking at Longfellow, Reiki, and Presumpscot, starting Longfellow at 5:30 to 6:30 with a 15-minute break in between, and then Reiki at 6:45 and Presumpscot at 8. The BLAC meetings will occur the evening after, and will be 5:30 for Presumpscot, 6:30 for Reiki, and 7:30 for Longfellow. So that is all we have for this evening. If there are any other questions, we are more than happy to continue to entertain them.
Wanted to see if Steve or Superintendent had anything that they wanted to add at this time. No? Steve, you're all set?
Yeah, I'm all set. I'm excited, and we have challenges ahead, but I mean, there's no but to it. But I guess I will say, but I am excited, and we'll get through the challenges, and however this works out, I am excited, and I'm just raring to go. So let's get these forums going, and let the vote happen, and let's keep our focus on these schools and get it done.
Thanks for being so positive, Steve. Appreciate it. In closing, anybody else have anything? Okay, so we are adjourning to a motion for adjournment at 7:12.
So moved.
Okay. And seconded by Board Member Balfont. And Councilor Ray was first. All those in favor of adjourning, please indicate. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Night, everyone.